We're going to kick off our virtual production session now. And if you saw that last really cool session earlier about the Rangers down there in Uganda, incredible. But you don't have to go to Uganda. You can do it on a screen. You can have virtual Uganda in your studio. But you wouldn't get real gorillas. I'm Neal Romanek. I'm editorial director of The Flint. We cover sustainability all across the industry, from script to distribution and across all verticals, including gaming, feature films, TV, advertising, sports, news. There's a lot of questions people have about virtual production. Even what is it, which we hope to answer a little bit now, and then kind of what it means for the future, what people need to know getting into virtual production, what studios and productions need to know. There's a lot about virtual production, I think, that still needs to be unpacked and even described and even a language created for. So I hope we can get at least scratch the surface of that today. If you guys would maybe start by introducing yourselves.
Yeah, sure. Hey. I'm Patrick Goodden. I'm technical sales manager for the UK and Ireland for Brompton Technology. So I look after customers in the UK and Ireland, which includes this lovely country here. Cool.
I am Ben Bentley. I am one of the studio executives up at Nightsky Studio. We are arguably the first turnkey VP setup in Scotland. We kind of all came from live events, and when the pandemic hit, we pivoted and moved into virtual production.
Hi, I'm Gavin Glover. I work for Digital Garage. I'm the technical services engineer specialising in virtual production. My background is as a stage technician for large virtual production stages for Industrial Light and Magic and Disney, Warner Brothers. I'm here for the stage experience.
Amazing. So we're going to start out with a short introduction from Patrick, and also you can maybe tell us a bit about what Brompton does and why Brompton is an important kind of starting point for the rest of our conversation here.
Yeah, sure, 100%. So I'll just give a brief overview of who Brompton is as a company and what we do. So we're a London-based technology manufacturer. All of our founders came from the live events industry. Before they made Brompton, they made lighting desks, the Flying Pig lighting desks, and the Whole Hog lighting desks were made by the founders, who eventually went on to make Brompton. So Brompton, as part of the sort of in the VP world, there's a huge amount of different bits of technology that needs to come together to make VP work, and we're just one of those bits of technology. So we're the video processing system. So we take in video content and we get it up onto the LED screen. So we're sort of a bit of digital plumbing. We'll take the video through our system and get it on the LED. But why that point of the system is really important is because you've done a lot of really good work before it hits our system. So you've made your virtual world or gone and shot your plates. You've set up your tracking system. You've got everything working within your media server or within Unreal. And then suddenly you need to send all of that work through one point to get it to the LED wall. And if that point fails, if it doesn't manage your color properly, if it doesn't respect what your camera's doing, then everything you've done before just falls apart and it doesn't look good, essentially. So that's why video processing is very important. We've got a small setup over there, which you can go and have a look and chat to lovely Harry afterwards to show off what we do on a smaller scale. But everything we do there is what we're doing at VP, just much bigger. Just talk about a few things that we've done. So we're not just a VP company, because our founders, they came from a very live events focused background. Before the pandemic, we were almost entirely live events, but focusing on the very high end of live events. You can see we do tours like the most recent Ed Sheeran tour runs on our thing, on our processing systems. But on the other end of things, we've got the BT Tower runs on our processing system, and that was purely because they wanted their purple to look exactly right, and we do a huge amount of work to get color looking great. And these two jobs are very good indicators of why we then succeeded in VP, because on Ed Sheeran, on these massive tours, we've got cameras pointing at him it needs the camera output needs to look good on the screen, and for the BT Tower, those colours of their logo needed to be accurate, and we do a lot of work in that. That meant like when on camera, in-camera virtual effects, VP and XR took off, we were in a really good position to sort of lead on that, and that's since the pandemic, over the last 4 years, we're now found in XR studios, which, you know, it's quite, it might not be correct in every sense, but XR, perhaps wall and a floor, VP, wall, and a ceiling. And here's some examples of things we've done. You know, if we talk about recent projects, we were recently on the most recent Barbie movie is probably the last big, like, large-scale production that came out recently that used Brompton processing to drive the back end of the LED. Cool. And then I'm just going to talk very briefly about, we do a lot of things within the processor to help make VP work easier. One of the things we do is we have a feature called Shutter Sync, where you can actually put your camera settings into our processor, and we will change how the LED works in order to match the camera. Without these features, you have to start tweaking your camera settings to match the LED, and that means you might be compromising like the artistic vision of your DOP and whatever they're trying to achieve. If you can put your camera settings into our processor, and then we'll change things so you don't have to change how you're shooting, which is very important for when people are shooting with LED. Another feature we've got is our frame remapping feature, which we're showing off here over here we're using it sort of more in a broadcast setting. We're putting in some digital markers and some like sort of tracking markers in the hidden frame, or what you can also do when you can shoot with multiple cameras is you can have two different perspectives in two different cameras, and each camera will only pick up the perspective that's correct for that camera's position. Or you could interleave a green frame, so you could shoot content in green on the same camera, meaning you've got a backup if you weren't happy with what you've shot in camera. And the last thing I'm just going to talk about, we can go through far more detail over there, but I'm not going to take up too much time on this stage, is I'm going to talk about sort of a bit where VP's going and where LED on camera is going. And that's for the introduction of more pixels than just red, green, and blue. Traditional LED panels for all these big live events just have, and in all VP stages now, just have red, green, and blue pixels. But those red, green, and blue pixels doesn't cover the whole of the spectrum, meaning that when it hits people's skin, people look very sort of red, because all the orangey tones in the skin isn't being reflected and captured by the camera. So now, Brompton now supports panels with additional pixels, like a white pixel, using our new True Light feature. And you can just see in this example, and in this example here, just how much difference that makes on people's skin tones when shooting in a VP volume. There's a bunch of other stuff that we do, but I just thought these were three things that really show how we're pushing forward how VP is used, and we're constantly trying to think and innovate within the industry to try and think of new ways to use LED on camera. Cool. So I'm going to say that's Brompton, and
Great.
I'll hand back to you.
Thank you, Patrick. So just to get a sort of take the temperature of you guys, how many people here would say that they're fairly familiar with what virtual production is? Okay, that's interesting. How many people have feel like they know nothing about virtual production? Some, maybe a little bit. Okay, so we some familiarity, but not, you know. Mm-hmm. Okay, so definitions. Virtual production.
Yep.
What is it? Is it just a fancy word for rear projection, which we've had for 100 years? Or what is virtual production?
Yes and no, I would say. It's VP has kind of become a catch-all term to describe anything that is got some projection medium being used, whether that be green screen, whether that be a telly and a literal like television. The words for what things are still developing, so it becomes very difficult to define what things are. You know, if you're looking at taking that traditional rear projection and bringing it into what we're now calling VP, which could be two slabs of telly, of screen, I should say, for doing rear projection stuff. Is that car processing? Is that simulated travel? Is what the definitions of what they are aren't there, so it's still quite a catch-all term. I would say that personally, the main push for what VP is taking some level of content and projecting it and arguably tracking that camera to affect the viewing angles of the content in real time, arguably in-camera VFX, which I think is another term that is used quite a lot.
So it's about creating an environment for action to happen in a way.
Yeah, it can also include things like previs and things like that. So actually developing real-time engines to use for visualization. So not just in-camera effects at all.
Okay, we're getting there. Well, hopefully by the end of this, we'll have put together some kind of working definition. And then what are, I guess, maybe starting with you, because you're actually operating a facility, what are people coming to you to use virtual production for? I mean, what are
a number
what are
of
the uses
things.
for it?
So we are kind of odd in the way that we've set ourselves up, in that we are building screens to spec for what is required for the shooting process, rather than having what is that, and I use the term loosely, traditional volume of the RECT set up in London, the Stage 5 at Stage V at Warner Brothers, Leaston. Those setups have been traditionally big volume, shoot on volume. That's what it is. What we are starting to try and do is look at doing smaller setups, so doing set extensions. Out of a window, you want to have, instead of a traditional backdrop, put some screen there and do bits and pieces. Doing driving plates, again, simulated travel, car process, whatever you want to call it, which is allowing shoots to be able to do that. The thing that they understand of rear projection, as you said, that's been about, and bring it into the 21st century and be able to give them more freedom to deal with colour and exposure, all the things that you want creatives to be able to play with to get what they want out of the final shot in camera. So we kind of cover the full range of things, from all of that right up to the full traditional VP of tracking in Unreal.
So it can be as simple as, like, I want to have I'm doing a fashion photo shoot and I don't want to fly my models all over the place. Let's just do some different backgrounds and we'll shoot them in New York, we'll shoot them in Iceland, whatever, to sort of very sophisticated entire workflows that are built around
I think you can go from one extreme to the other. It can be as simple as putting an image up on a screen and shooting against it as a static backdrop if you are, say, doing photography, up to your full world is a virtual environment that you have built with all of the aspects that you would expect to have in a real on-location shoot. You have that's kind of arguably either end of the spectrum, and you can have anything in between. It's quite a broad term and quite a broad catch-all that, as I say, the definitions aren't quite there yet to be able to say what things are.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I mean, in terms of, I threw back up this slide because I thought it might be good just to have that as kind of like a reference of. But yeah, I guess I was just going to go back briefly to the question of what is VP. When everyone thinks about VP, it's that lower right-hand picture where you're doing your virtual effects live in camera, essentially. So it's IC VFX, people call it. It's IC, in camera virtual effects. We've got the couple in the middle. This is for a music video, but then everything else around it is incredibly important as well. We can't just, as you were talking about, moving between two different locations like that. Yes, you can, but if you don't have like your traditional sets, your traditional lighting, everything else is still incredibly important. You can't just switch the wall from one scene to another and expect it to look perfect. You see here we've got this, the floor is a built-up set. It's got the ground of the planet and stuff, and all that stuff you still need to think about in when you're doing this stuff. It's not it's not the screen doesn't fix everything, I guess is what I'm saying.
You use VP as arguably the mid to distance, not really the foreground. You still need to have If you don't have those set pieces on, it falls apart very quickly, and suddenly you are looking at a big screen going, "Ooh, that doesn't look good. What have we done?"
Yeah, if we go over there and put the screen in focus, you can see straight away it's not workable. So,
And then where does green screen fit into all this? Is green screen virtual production? Is that allied to and green screen
especially
workflows?
if you're tracking the camera or tracking a person within the green screen as well. That's definitely virtual production. Green screen's actually a really good entry point into virtual production for people. So if they can't afford big LED screens, then green screens are the way to go.
Yeah, it's to carry on what you're saying there. It's, you know, the most joyous thing about what most people are calling VPI tracking is that it's Unreal as a program to learn in. As it stands, is free. You can do tracking with your iPhone. You can buy a green screen for relatively cheap. That barrier to entry is very low, and it's all you're ever doing is changing one part of that process. In that, if you want to go take a step up in tracking, okay, replace your iPhone with something else. You want to move to doing real volume work, all you're doing is changing that final output medium. You're not having to relearn everything you've done. It's a very easy skill set to start to build up on and go from not understanding it to understanding it well, and using it in a professional sense to essentially earn money from.
But I think that's an important point too, because we can all look at good for Lucasfilm. I'm glad they're using virtual production. What does that have to do with me? And so is it something that if I have my own cool little streaming channel that I can kind of start playing with?
Yeah, very, very much so. We are...
I mean, beyond just I've got a green screen and I'll put a background on.
Yeah, so we've been doing some stuff with a small YouTuber. He's got, I think, maybe now 800 odd followers, something like that. But his whole channel's been based around him doing VP in his house. So he's in a 2 meter by 2 meter office that he started on green screen with no tracking, and then managed to get a sponsorship to do to get a small tracking setup. And then we took him up to our studio and said, "Here you go. Here's a volume. Have some fun." And it's as I say that the knowledge of Unreal, which is essentially what most of what we're talking about in VP bases around, is free to learn and use. So it's the only barrier to stop you getting any better is just how much time you're willing to put into it. Yeah.
And then you're talking about Unreal as well, and it kind of sort of backs us up a bit. We see the screen and oh, that's beautiful. But it's kind of literally the end result of a lot of things that are happening sort of that lead up to that, I guess. So, it's like people talking about blockchain. How do I use blockchain? It's like, well, how do I use electricity? Well, there's all kinds of ways you could use it, I guess, if you want. So I can't, I could say I want to virtual productionize my production, but it doesn't mean anything unless there's a whole bunch of things that make sense leading up to it. That it should be a natural progression of the thing I'm trying to accomplish.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
It's certainly from our side, the thing that we've been looking at is you need to front load your production. So you need to take what was that post-production, we'll fix it in post, and arguably bring that right into the pre-production, even into the development stage of knowing what you're going to step into and knowing what you want to achieve with it to work out if it is the tool that you need to achieve what you want. And it's one of these things of where, as you say, the Lucasfilm Disney money is not what everybody has. So how do you manage to scale that back and make it fit for what you need it to be? So as long as you start to storyboard, start to take that workflow and kind of grab it and run with it, you'll get what you want out of it. But you need to front load that as much as you possibly can. The more time you have, the better result you'll get.
Yeah, do you have that, working with people who are doing virtual production?
So virtual art departments have kind of sprung up because of a result of virtual production. So there are whole new departments that are now working on these contents before they go into production, where it was all would have been done post-production against the green screen before. Now they've just, like you say, they've front-loaded it, which puts a bit more pressure on the art departments to get it right before the shoot goes out, but it works well.
And then do they, when you're finally shooting on the stage, or you're just finally shooting with the screen, is that a time where you can keep making changes or making decisions, or should you really have thought of everything beforehand? I mean, you kind of like to think you can kind of keep
beforehand, but if you want to move the sun from over there to over there, then that's not a problem at all. Or huge buildings or cityscapes that you can just rotate. It's like playing God.
So it is that in using Unreal. I think maybe that's the thing that we need to always keep in mind, is that you're making Unreal real. I guess you're taking Unreal and kind of putting it in a space that people can walk around in. So you're always thinking, well, if I can do this in Unreal, then I can put it on a screen somehow.
As long as it's having that here as an open blank canvas to make whatever you want is astonishing from a creative point of view. It is also its own downfall, in that if you give an artist a blank slate and say do whatever, where do they go? How do you start? What is that final point everybody's trying to get to?
Creativity needs boundaries.
And it's in terms of environment and assets, you can have a bank of them, but if you've not thought far enough through that you know what that hero piece is, shall we say, you don't have it the same way as you would with a props department in shooting on scene. If you don't have that, you don't have it. There's no amount of post that can fix that. So it's making sure, as I say, it's making sure that you know what you're trying to do with it, and kind of, just following it through to the end, shall I say.
So what are the big, I guess, sort of technical issues or problems or things that people need to be aware of?
One of the
before
biggest things
they go in,
is camera teams. When you work with a camera team that's not worked in virtual production before, you create a lot of interruptions to the process that they've been using for years and years and years, and they're all very well rehearsed at the system that they use, and suddenly you come along and you want to calibrate lenses and you want to do all these different jobs that they're not used to doing. So trying to communicate those things out to camera teams in a way that doesn't frustrate them is a big thing on set, and if you can master that, you're halfway there.
Can I bring just my regular camera team on set and they'll figure it out, or do I really need a specialized team?
It's normally the same camera teams, but they just need a bit of hand-holding through the different processes. But normally, once you've explained why you're going through the processes that you're going through, they jump on board with it pretty quickly. You get some that are stuck in their ways and don't want to change, but most of them, once they understand the reasons why you're doing things and the reasons you're interrupting them, they're quite welcoming of it.
Yep. To follow on what you're saying, it's whatever way you want to look at virtual production, tracking is kind of where those two departments meet together. Is you're going to be strapping a lot of extra things to their camera that they have not necessarily understood why it's there or what it's doing and how important it is where it is, because essentially the tracking is trying to work out where the sensor is in real space. So if they have to swing a lens and suddenly move your tracking, whether you're doing inside out or outside in tracking, suddenly you're going to have to go, okay, hold on, we need to recalibrate this and work out where our 0 point is again. So if you don't, again, have that conversation before you start, you're going to run into problems. But as long as you're upfront about it and say, look, I know this is going to be a bit of a problem, but we're going to do this all together, I think you can get through it very smoothly. And as you say, most camera teams are totally up for making it work, because that's what we're all there to do.
So you're saying you may be unique in Scotland so far?
Yeah.
What is the state of VR in Scotland right now, or are you the state of VR in Scotland right now?
Kind of, I think, is the honest answer. In that we are the first with the full turnkey setup, shall we say? So that's from screen tracking, processing. We are there. More and more productions are starting to get their head around VP and are starting to begin to have those conversations. What I'd say, the thing that's been picked up the most has been those rear projection to screen simulated travel, because it's the easiest dipping your toes into the world of virtual production without having to really change your workflow, and it allows that, it demystifies the technology to them, and they can start to get their head around how to use screen and how it is another element that is part of the production, not necessarily the solution to all problems, because it brings up its own set of problems when you start. There are pros and cons to everything, so it's yeah, I would say that's the major push where things are sitting at the minute. The conversations are starting, and it is moving forward. I think we're not far away from starting to have shoots that are doing full VP. I know Anansi Boys is arguably the first up here to do it, but none of that was based in Scotland. They all, as far as I'm aware, all came from elsewhere. So, you know, going into part of this conversation of the sustainability of it, you're not really saving anything by flying crew in. So it's a conversation that has started, and I think we're a long way from being anywhere close to the end, but at least it has started.
So what is it that Scotland needs, I guess, to be able to set up that infrastructure or set up the community to make that happen? I guess, you know, technologically and in terms of community.
Training and allowing people to play on spaces, and that's what Nightsky we've done is we've pushed for. How can we get people just in front of it? Because the second you stand in front of it and you've got an 18 meter by 5 meter screen in front of you, the first thing that everybody goes is, oh my god, which that shouldn't be the constant fear of it, of like, it's just another tool. It's no different than being on a set where you've got a massive set build. It's just a different workflow. So the more that we can do training, the more that we can do outreach, and the more that we can allow people to just come and understand it, the better it'll be. And I think that's actually not just a Scotland problem. I think that's a UK-wide problem. And it's certainly a thing that we are trying to tackle in our own way, which is why we're doing training with Brompton.
I will say, last minute, but if anyone's free tomorrow or Thursday, we're doing a full day of Brompton user training at Nightsky Studios. It's free of charge. There is, I think, there's a few more spaces tomorrow, and there's a couple of spaces on the Thursday training. But last time I checked, there's spaces on both days. So if anyone's free and wants to come and see the space, we're not training on the big screen, but I think we're going to turn the big screen on at some point and do some stuff on the big screen. But we're doing a full day of Brompton user training, and that covers everything from using the product to setting up with the camera and, you know, all those sort of things. So if you're interested, Nightsky Studios tomorrow and the day after.
And then can people sign up online or just
if you
grab
go to
you
if
after?
If you go to our website, go to the support page, you can scroll down and there's a link to training. You can just sign up there.
Is that Brompton Technology?
Yes, yeah.
.org.
BromptonTechnology.com. We have cards over there. Yeah, I think it's BromptonTechnology.com or BromptonTech.com. Put Brompton Technology into Google and then click. Actually, if you put Brompton Technology Training into Google, it'll probably take you straight to the right page.
There you go. Yeah. Now you mentioned sustainability, and that's a huge thing around the conversation with virtual production. You know, do I fly to Uganda? In the case of the film that we saw, yes, you definitely have to fly to Uganda. But you know, when you can save travel, that is travel and power are the two big things you want to get rid of fastest in terms of reducing your carbon footprint. So we kind of know, or we think we know, that virtual production is certainly more sustainable than flying. But that's kind of all we know, don't we? I mean, what do we really know about, what can we sort of guarantee in terms of sustainability in virtual production?
So Sony have done quite an extensive report on the sustainability in virtual production. A company we're working with, Final Pixel, do a symposium every year of which is called VP Green, which is adds all sorts of buzzword problems on if you try and Google it. But essentially, the report that Sony had was they were looking at two productions that were one was a 1 hour scripted drama based in British Columbia, and the other was like, I think, a 12-part production based all over. They essentially, the final data ended up being that it was 80% more efficient per metric ton of carbon to shoot on VP than it was on location, which is, that might be cherry picking the data, and it may be that that's not what it is, but even if it comes anywhere close to that, you are well on your way to being able to make things just to tackle that sustainability point. But that is also not to say that everything should be done on VP, because dependent on what you're trying to do, going to Uganda to shoot, if you're doing a documentary, it will 100% be better to go there than it will be to shoot on VP, because your crews are smaller. You're arguably going to be maybe a crew of 5 to 10 as opposed to 50 to 100 to 200 people on set. Again, it's another tool in the toolbox to kind of look at the overall sustainability of the industry as a whole and bring that carbon footprint down.
Yeah, I guess as a manufacturer, we're not on doing shoots, we're providing tech. But from our side of things, sustainability-wise, just making sure the product lasts for a long time. Like, the processor that's in Nightsky Studios is a processor that was released 6 years ago, but it's not an out-of-date product by any means. That is still going into brand new studios now. We're still updating it with new tech, and that product will be in studios in hopefully 5 years' time and still be top of the range and doing everything it needs to do. So we're constantly adding new features to make sure that the tech we've already released is still top of the range, rather than manufacturing, which you need to buy a new box, We want the products that we make to last a very long time. And then we're also looking at, I talked about the RGBW panels that are coming up. We've done tests, and if you introduce more pixels, you can run all the pixels at a lower voltage because you're covering the spectrum with more pixels, and that we found that can reduce your power consumption per panel by about 30%. So as the tech moves forward, tech that lasts a long time, but also introducing new tech that does help your power consumption for sustainability can be a big thing. So that's what we can do from the manufacturer's side.
I think that's an interesting point on the brightness level of things. Of that, if you run your screen less bright, you're obviously going to use less electricity. But historically, there has been a problem of that as you start to dim your screen, your color starts to shift, which is what Brompton is tackling. And I think, I don't know about you, but certainly a large majority of any time we shot on screen, it's only ever been running at maybe 40, maybe 50% for the majority of the shoot. So although you've got that 1500, 1600 nit brightness, you're not actually using it, so you're instantly being able to bring that brightness down but keep the color accurate, which is, as I say, is where this kind of the longer term sustainability across all of the sectors are going to push together and kind of help make this better and better. And it's, as you say, the white pixel is
Hey, thank you.
There are also other benefits to not travelling around, especially in pandemics and things like that. So being able to film an entire film in a single studio in a controlled environment, there's a big benefit to that as well.
Yeah, or being, it's 106 degrees Fahrenheit in American, in Los Angeles, and you're not going to be able to go outside and shoot.
Yep.
But, inside you're all good.
It's also there's also a bigger conversation to be had around sustainability of not just looking at carbon, but also your workforce essentially. If you're able to essentially stay in one place and shoot in a studio and not have to tour about, it instantly opens up the industry again to like new mothers, people who have got other life parts that get in the way of arguably what is that? Oh, you need to be able to go anywhere at the drop of a hat. Why do you need to? I think there's a good conversation to be had around that mixture of just opening the door to more people and allowing more people to be able to just work and do something that is, at the end of it, pretty cool.
We talk about that at the Flint a lot, is this idea of sustainability ultimately being about building a different kind of future that benefits people.
Yep.
And I'm kind of reminded a bit of like the sort of old studio system from the 1940s, where everything happened on that lot.
Yep.
The idea of going out and shooting location would be like, maybe, but everybody works on the lot. Everybody goes home to their houses in LA or whatever in the evening, and that you actually have physically a community built around a space rather than
it allows you to create a sustainable community because you can have that work-life balance which everybody is striving to get. There's the conversation, as I'm sure we're all aware, in the corporate world, if you will, of 4-day work weeks. How do you do that in film and TV when you've got such tight schedules? There are countries trying it, and I'm it'll be interesting to see what the final results are that come out of that. But that's the striving force, is to make it that you're not having to burn people out, and essentially people leave the industry because they can't continue to have that sustainable life.
And if you're not spending, burning up just hours waiting in airports, that's a
You're
big
also
deal.
not damaging the environments that you're going to. If you're going to somewhere like Antarctica or something like that, you're going to leave a footprint there, not so much a carbon footprint, but in terms of your waste and rubbish and stuff. So if you can bring all that into a studio and not have to go somewhere like that, then that's a good thing.
Amazing. Questions from you guys? We need our mic, which Matt is going to bring over. I'll keep talking.
Hang on. Is it
So
still
what is, while we get the mic sorted, what does virtual production look like 10 years from now?
There we go. We've got a microphone.
And do we have, I guess there's that question, I've been thinking about AI, are we going to need screens at all at some point? I mean, is it?
That is
Big
a
question.
Yeah. How long have we got left of this?
I think as someone who sells processors that drive screens, I'm going to say yes.
Always need screens.
100%. We will need
Yes, you will definitely. We will always. Brompton is a sponsor, and we will always need screens.
Yeah.
But in terms of the tech, I mean, you will always need physical stuff.
Yeah, I
But
think
how will that evolve? And
VP in its very essence is only 5 years old, 6 years old, really. So where it's going to be in 10 years' time is anybody's guess.
I think most productions will have an element of it.
Yeah. I think I would agree in that most, if not, they would at least have an understanding of it and be able to potentially use it and not have this fear around it, which I think that's probably what it will be. But in terms of what technology looks like, yes, there'll be technology.
and will it become part of the? Because I think we were talking a little bit about this in our calls before this, but that kind of where it sits and is it a camera department thing, or is it an art department thing, or kind of where do those fall in terms of?
I think it's
going forward, is it when it does become just a regular part of everything you do
I think
on every production?
a lot of the additional crew that are currently on set to deal with the VP wall will start to become much more integrated into the departments, because they will have a better understanding of what it is, and it doesn't become so specialist. But there will still be a brain bar, whatever you want to call it, of stage operators who are actually running and doing that interconnect between each of the departments together, because you in the same way you don't expect most of your departments to know how another department works, it's the same thing. We've essentially created another department. You've arguably got a VFX house out of their dark rooms and put them onto the shooting floor.
Yeah. Which not all of them may enjoy.
No.
Go ahead, yeah.
I guess in terms of where does VP fit, the training, who's that kind of geared towards?
So that the training it's user training of Brompton's system, I guess. So we're as a manufacturer of just the box, we can only train on the things that relate to that. So it's users of that, and it does go through the whole pipeline. It will cover things like people who are working in a live event space and things like that. So but if in terms of a VP, someone whoever's there in charge of the LED, in charge of the Brompton box, or in charge of the processing, will need to know how to dive in and go through the menus and find what they need to do and troubleshoot. So we go through a lot of troubleshooting steps and things like that. So if you do have problems, where the best way to where to look for them, and also where the right things to click inside our software to make fixing the problem easier. So that's it's definitely user training. It's who it's geared towards.
It's somebody once described it. It is helping you learn who to shout at on set.
Very, very important. Other questions?
Thank you, guys. That was excellent. We're working on a virtual production studio ourselves, very scaled down, mainly because of the costs of setup and the amount of crew and etc. As you'll well know. What advice would you give to people out there who are looking to replicate what these big budget TVs, ad spots can devote to this on a smaller scale and making it more accessible to independent creators, indies, things like that?
from our side, come and speak to us. You know, we are Nightsky is a thing. We are arguably the first that have got it in Scotland. We do not want to be the last. We will give whatever knowledge we've got away for as much as we can. It's knowledge, and that community that sits around VP at the minute is the thing that it's doing very well. You know, it started essentially as a bunch of people putting trackers on the top of a camera. Like it's now become a larger thing, shall we say? And I think you could probably pinpoint that down to like The Mandalorian, but also because of that, and it's got pro and con, and that great, it's shown that this technology exists, but also now everybody assumes you need to have that Disney money to do it. You can do it at a small scale, you just need to keep trying. But yeah, come and give us a shout afterwards, or Lewis is hiding around here somewhere. Come and see us and come and talk.
There's also lots of software out there now to help democratise some of the stuff like that. Things like Pixotope are worth looking at. Make the workflow a little bit easier for people that are just picking it up.
Yeah, because end display is great, but also horrible. I think would be the nicest way to put it. Yeah. And go do Brompton training.
Yeah, come and do it. Yeah. Cool, amazing. Cool.
And do I need to start learning Unreal? I probably need to start learning Unreal anyway, but if I want to be doing VP, should I be high on my priority list?
It's a really good fun thing to learn. I would learn it just through personal interest.
I know, that's kind of my take on it.
It's free. Like it is a arguably professional bit of software that has zero cost to start playing about with. The community assets and the community marketplace is incredible. There are free, huge assets every month. There is a world of free training online that at least lets you start to understand how to use the engine rather than the on stage stuff. The documentation around VP is slightly more tricky, but again, those forums in the community are genuinely always happy to help solve problems, and Epic themselves, I would say, are very, very on board with being able to be talked to about how to solve VP problems.
But it has a great ecosystem for stuff that you can just get from their marketplace. You know, you could make some fairly convincing games and films just with content that you've taken from other artists. Yeah.
And a lot of it is free as well, which is, again, like Quixel and the Megascan whole library is free, and they are stunning bits of asset, basically, and they are free to use. There is, as far as I'm aware at the minute, there's no licensing required for using any of that in a commercial setting, so use it while it's there.
We'll say, we talk about the cost of it. I mean, VP doesn't have to be Unreal. You can just use, do plates. Like driving scenes is a big thing that gets used with VP a lot, and that can be 2D video plates, and that obviously a lot of the work is done for you, or you go out with a camera and shoot something yourself, and you don't need to create a whole 3D environment. So it doesn't have to be 3D Unreal World. You can do it with driving plates or 2.5D scenes, and
you can do it with images as well.
Yeah,
just solids. Again, it will. The more time and the more you use the full pipeline, the more it starts to blend those. Is this actually real? And that's all you're doing, really. But you can get astonishing results from essentially not using Unreal and just doing plates, single images,
360 videos.
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, exactly.
If it's good enough for Hitchcock, it's good enough for you. We probably have time for one more question. It's your chance. If you want, you have a second question. Do you have a follow-up? Wait 1 second, because we'll want to get you for the videos. So.
In terms of mapping real spaces and converting them into your digital environment, any quick workflow that you can talk through how that is happening now or will happen more at real to digital?
Download an app on your iPhone, 3D scanner app. You can start scanning straight away. You can have stuff ready in minutes. Just send it as an FBX.
Higher quality, like Matterport?
So you essentially, this is where you can start to steal from, or not steal, you can start to bring in another industry, which is site surveying. If you go and try and get an architect to build a house for you, the first thing they're going to do is come and probably LiDAR scan your house. That's basically the same thing. You're taking a point cloud and turning it into an environment, that's the workflow. There are companies all over the place that might not necessarily have thought about doing it in the virtual production sense, but those workflows already exist. But yeah, I would say the results that you can get from Matterport, even from, I'm assuming you're talking about Polycam or something like that, they are great. It doesn't do it all for you. You still are going to have to take that environment and polish it a bit. So it doesn't matter as long as you've got essentially the blocking out of your scene done with that scan, you're most of the way there.
Yeah, you'd be surprised at the results. A bit of a change in lighting and some atmospherics in there, and you can hide a lot.
Cool. Pardon me. And with that, thanks very much, guys.
No problem. Thank you.